So, you're the guy who gets to hear my last words. Lucky me.
Like hell they're your last.
It's okay, Cloud. It's okay. They were my bombs. They were all my victims. I had it coming. My hero. So gentle.
Just try to hang on.
So dramatic. I just wish that I could have had you over again. Everyone with Mom's cooking. I really wanted to believe we could.
Yeah. You owe me a pizza.
PlayStation Pals, a video game podcast about all things PlayStation. I am your host, Nick, and I am joined by the Barrett to my Cloud, John.
Hello.
Is that better?
That's better. I think I can get behind that one a little bit more, seeing as you are the Final Fantasy VII aficionado between the two of us. So, well done.
And Barrett, and you had a problem because Kratos was bigger and stronger, and Barrett
and more handsome and smarter and
no. But Barrett meets the criteria of just bigger and stronger. I'll give you that.
Perfect. No, I think that's perfect.
And we're saying that because you just heard a clip from Final Fantasy VII Remake, in which Jessie is dying, and Cloud's last words to her is, "You owe me a pizza."
Real quick, Nick, I gotta chime in here. So, little behind the scenes here. I just recently beat Final Fantasy VII Remake for the first time, probably about a month or two ago. One of the games that I missed from the PS4 generation, so I wanted to get behind it. And, going through the game, I had a lot of thoughts and things, but when I heard that line, it surprised me so much that it was the first thing I had to mention to Nick when I saw him the next time, and he lit up immediately when I said it, because it is just so funny. I mean, Jessie, she's not just dying; she just got destroyed, and she's laying on the ground, and she's in Cloud's arms, and it's just this tender moment, and then the delivery of that line is so funny to me.
Yeah, the line works in other media. Like, there's been movies, video games. A lot of times people are on their deathbed and they're like, "You can't die. We still have so much to live for." They're like this and that. Mm-hmm. But just the delivery of that line is just so good. It's like he recorded that opposite of the whole situation, and they're like, "Oh, that's great," and then they just inserted it in there, and it just sounds so ridiculous. It's just...
Yeah, no. Well done, Square Enix writing team. Well done.
Yeah, I think we could do. I don't intentionally plan to make every intro ridiculous audio clips of video game writing, but there are certainly plenty of them that we could keep this as an ongoing theme for sure.
Definitely.
So welcome to the podcast. If you're just joining us, this is how it works. We're each going to bring 3 things up. It can be a video game we're playing, a news article, a topic, a email to PlayStationPalsPod@gmail.com, anything we feel like talking about. And then we bring those together for a total of 6 things. So I'm going to bring 3 things, John's going to bring 3 things, and we're going to talk about them. And I'm going to kick things off. And I'm going to set the stage for this one. It was a Thursday after Summer's Games Fest. Me and John were just in a crappy mood. As we discussed last week, we thought Summer Games Fest was going to be this blowout of information. There was going to be some more Sony first-party games there. And while we did get The Last of Us Part 1, it was a down day for sure.
Definitely.
But then that day after, our boy Jason Schreier, the insider with all the information on all the studios, he comes out with a report in Bloomberg News that, hey, Sony still plans to have God of War come out this year in November. And also they're planning on having an event before the end of June to discuss that and announce it. And I remember texting you, John. I think I texted you the Gandalf gif of him like all glowing and happy and this just jubilation as he saw this. So, and since Jason Schreier is known to be fairly reliable, I believe this to be true. And then just to piggyback on that, Tom Henderson, who's a freelance writer for a bunch of sites, he also confirmed that this is what he heard and that it was going to be part of several more events later this month, as well as part of this end of June showcase that might occur. So I wanted to ask you, John, do you believe that this is all true, that next week we're going to get a Sony event? And that, do you think God of War will be there and that God of War is planned to be released this year?
So a little bit of yes, a little bit of no. So like you said, Schreier is about as trusted of a person as there is in the industry, right? He's had a long history working at Kotaku, works at Bloomberg now. Very rarely is he wrong. Same thing kind of goes with Tom Henderson. They're just two very well-connected people, so obviously they have sources, whether at Sony, Microsoft, YouTube, who knows. But I typically want to believe everything they say. So I do definitely believe God of War is coming out this year. I don't, at least that's what, internally Sony still believes. Sony might not know whether it's going to be ready or not, so they're hesitant to put a date on it. So I think that is definitely going to happen. But when it comes to Sony having an event, as much as we may want it, I would probably put my camp in the no, put it in the no camp, just because, we're recording this on June 22nd. It's a Wednesday, right? There is a chance that Sony could come out tomorrow and say that, hey, we're doing an event next week. But just with other tangentially related things that we've heard, which I'm sure you're probably going to talk about here in a second, Nick, but, this in-zone event, right, that just got basically talked about today. And that's scheduled for next week on the 28th. I can't imagine that Sony would be having multiple events in the same week. I think it might be possible that the rumors and inside information that these guys have heard is probably pointing to a Sony event, but I don't think anybody would think that it would be anything except for maybe a first-party blowout, maybe a PSVR blowout or something like that, instead of this random hardware accessory event that we're going to seem to have. And so I think that's probably where a lot of the news is coming from. Because otherwise, it just doesn't seem. Things are dwindling down. It's like if you asked me 2 weeks ago, is Sony going to have an event? I'd say, absolutely, man. They have VR to talk about. They have the new PS Plus thing they got to talk about. The only first-party game we know of that's coming is God of War. So we need with this information. But over the past 2 weeks, everything has kind of just been scattershot, right? Like we got The Last of Us. Part 1 remake at Summer Games Fest. We're getting this weird, we got the press release of the PS Plus stuff earlier in the month. PSVR kind of had half of the state of play earlier this month. So it seems like they're almost taking everything that they could have put into an event that themselves could have put on and just sprinkling it around here or there. So as much as I want to know what the other teams are doing, I think we just live in a different age now. I think, since the Cyberpunk fiasco and just generally the way that games have been being made the past couple of years, they're taking longer to make, they're more expensive. I don't think companies are as comfortable putting dates on things as early as we're used to. So, I don't think they're going to want to put those dates on there. And, when God of War comes out later this year, we might get a state of play a little bit ahead of time. But that game's going to be so huge anyway that they don't need this long marketing lead up into it. So, I wish we had more info coming in, but I don't think so.
Yeah, it has been a strange month about announcements. They've been all over the place, and IGN just blew out that Hyenas game today, coming from Creative Assembly and Sega. just randomly out of the blue. And why wouldn't this be at the myriad of other events that were earlier this year? Or earlier this month? And same thing with God of War. Why is God of War kind of sitting here waiting? If they, I mean, unless it's that by the wire, right? They still are unsure whether it's going to make this November release date. Like, why wasn't it here at the State of Play? Why was it not at Summer Games Fest or any other planned announcements if it wasn't going to be in this month at all?
Right.
But that being said, when you got two notable reporters kind of like both saying this is what they're hearing, and Jason Schreier did kind of say, like, as of right now, the plan is November. Like, video game development changes all the time. Like, it could be November as of June, and then in July, it's like, nah, it's not going to make it, so 2023. But it is really weird. If whether it goes either way, it is really hard to say. I don't know, but
yeah, I could see. I mean, something that I've kind of noticed a little bit this generation too is, during the PS4, I think that was really the generation that Sony had its huge coming out party that really separated itself from the pack in terms of first party development. Every single game that they came out with last generation was a 10 out of 10 fucking banger. Everybody loved them. God of War, Horizon, Last of Us Part 2. Well, I guess critically at least that one. Spider-Man. But, they were so well received critically and commercially. And it seems like so far this generation, I don't think the quality's dropped. But I do think there's this interesting thing among, let's just say the internet, where these games are coming out like Horizon Forbidden West, right? Receives great scores. I think it's sitting at an 88 on Metacritic. I don't think anybody who's played both Zero Dawn and Forbidden West would say that Forbidden West is anything but an improvement on the first one. But it seems like there's almost people are a little bit down on these properties. And, specifically with Horizon, Elden Ring came out around there, and we know what a force that is. But Gran Turismo, right? That's another. That one came out, I think it was in 87. Again, it had the microtransaction kind of drama that surrounded it a little bit. But again, people seem kind of down on that. So I would bet internally right now, Sony is really, really, really making sure that God of War is going to be what the first one was in this generational type title, because if not, then the trajectory is still declining, and I want them sure they want to make sure they do everything they can to protect their IP, because at the end of the day, that's the number one thing Sony has, in my opinion, over everybody else, is they have first party content like no one else. And so, yeah, they might not know, because if they can hit this November date, great. But if not, I'm sure they're willing to delay it just because there's nothing else coming out this fall. We know Starfield got delayed. There'll be the typical players, Call of Duty, blah, blah, blah. But, if they need to delay it, I think they will. So I don't see any reason, again, to my point earlier, you can put that release date in August for November, give a 3-month marketing period, and you're still going to see massive success, because as we all know, people still can't find PS5. So that game's going to have long legs. But it's just we're kind of living in a new time with the way that these companies operate and how early they announce things, how much details they put on things. Yeah, I don't know, man. We'll see.
So over under this year or not this year for God of War. If you were to put money on it, where are you leaning towards?
This year.
Not the event part, but let's just say the announcement of, or what the date's going to be. Is it 2023 or 2022? I'm sorry.
It's 2022. I think they'll hit it. I mean, Sony Santa Monica is, a very, very talented team. I think they're definitely one of those teams that respects their workplace culture as well. So I think that they're not going to need to crunch. I think they've put their pieces in order, and they're it's. I don't want this to come across negatively, but God of War Ragnarok, at least by what we've seen so far, does seem like it's reusing a lot of assets that the first one does, right? So, I think that they can put the pieces together, get it out on time, and fill that November period, just to get some holiday sales. But I would say it's coming this year, especially after dropping us a 2021 release date first off. It'd be a little insulting if it didn't, but, I just want them to make that game whenever it comes out, have it be as perfect as possible, because the first one is
was truly something special, and it'd be a little bit of a bummer if this one was a big step backwards.
Yeah. And as someone who predicted this game to be out by now, as I did last year with you,
Yes, you did.
yeah, I am in the same boat. It's 2022 for sure. But it's just me being not optimistic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's no proof one way or another, but yeah, man, I'd be very surprised because that means that the only thing for the rest of the year for PlayStation is The Last of Us, and I feel like they have to have at least something else.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
All right. So, John, what are we talking about next?
So I wanted to kind of go over and just talk a little bit about the new PS Plus subscription service. So, as a lot of PlayStation fans know, PlayStation has revamped their PS Plus service, taking something that we've all been used to for a couple of years, which, you pay for your online, you get a couple free games, we're all happy, we all move on. Some people bitch about, the games that we get received, but at the end of the day, they're all free. But, with the rise of Xbox Game Pass, Sony needed to answer in some way. And while I don't think this is a one-for-one comparison, I just kind of wanted to get your temperature, Nick, on like how you think this service is. And just for the audience, we'll kind of go over a couple things here first and foremost. So what PlayStation did is they broke PS Plus into 3 separate tiers. Previously it was just PS Plus, one tier, you get it. You pay $60 a year, you get the online and the free games. Now you have the option to get PlayStation Essential, PlayStation Extra, or PlayStation Premium, all at different price points. And PlayStation Essential is everything we know as previous subscribers, right? It's still the same thing. You get a couple free games, you get the online subscription. PlayStation Plus Extra, which costs $99 a year, that gets you some PS4 and PS5 games just added into your catalog, basically to download for free. And honestly, I think it's a pretty good list. You got new games for PS5 like Returnal. You get some, heavy hitters, Demon Souls, some of the Uncharted games. Some really good stuff. Death Stranding being another one. And then in the top tier, PlayStation Premium, you get access to some cloud streaming, so you can stream some old PS3 games, as well as access to some classic catalogs, a lot of PS1 games. And something that, is kind of a minor selling point, but game trials, where basically there's going to be a select few games. PlayStation decides that you can go in, try out for free for a specific amount of time to see if it's something that you would want to buy or not. Some big games on there too, like Horizon Forbidden West, I believe is one, Cyberpunk 2077, but not quite a ton there at this point. So just kind of wanted to get your initial gut reaction, Nick. Obviously there's a lot of details here. I'm not going to bore the audience with going over every single specific of, what games are included and whatnot. But, do you think it's been a good rollout so far, or do you think that there is some room for improvement with either maybe the messaging, the service itself, or, do you think it's something that is going to gain some steam?
Yeah, I think in a vacuum, not comparing it directly to Game Pass, that yeah, it is a really good value. If you're the one that's been a little bit behind on games, you got a PS5 just now or in the last few months, and you missed out on a lot of the last year's big games, this is an incredible value. For $100, you're getting Miles Morales, Death Stranding, Ghost of Tsushima. You're getting all these big titles of over the last few years, and that's a great value. There's so many games in there. But is it all the good ones? No, but it's really good for that value. And it's still updating. The list we launched with is not the list we're going to get at the end of the year. We got, Stray is going to be a day and date game that we're going to get. And there will be more titles added throughout the year. So just at face value, it is a great deal. Now, when you compare it directly to Microsoft and their releasing their brand new games whenever they come out, as we talked about. We got 12. They're not going to have a first party game this year, but it's really hard to compare when they're giving away their best titles for free. If God of War was on this thing, Ragnarok, and Gran Turismo 7 and Horizon Forbidden West, I think, well, it would be a no brainer. But I really think the value of this is where you're at as a gamer and where you're at as far as how on top of games you play are. So for myself, I'm on top of things. I usually play the games I want. I get them when they come out typically, and then, if I miss a game, I get to it fairly quickly. So most of these games I've played, and out of all the big games, I think Death Stranding was the only one that I missed. And just foreshadowing a bit, we're going to talk about it a little later. So for me, the value isn't all there, but it's still really, really good. Like if I want to play Death Stranding, I might as well just pay the $40 because everything I get with it. So,
Yeah.
no, it looks really, really good. I know the direct comparison to Game Pass, it doesn't look as good, but how can you not fault the value? There are so many games in this thing that it's just worth the price.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on a couple important things there. First and foremost, I'm just going to say it. I think anybody who wants to poo-poo on this service just because it doesn't have day and date Sony releases is high. Like that is the most insane thing that I think a consumer could kind of think. I mean, you look at, again, what does Sony have over everybody else? They have these premium title games. There's not a game on Xbox that's as high of quality as Horizon, that's as high of quality as God of War, that's as high of quality as The Last of Us, Spider-Man, and the list goes on. And that's not me trying to be a fanboy. That's me trying to be a video game, lifelong lover. I understand games. I know what makes them tick, the things that are good and bad about them. And so it would shoot Sony in the foot to add day and date. So I think that that's definitely an unrealistic expectation. But that's not to say, again, that the service has bad games. I'm looking, I was able to find on Reddit just a list of somebody who kind of listed out all the best games on the service. Red Dead 2, God of War, Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, Demon's Souls, Celeste, Shadow of the Colossus, Batman Arkham Knight, Dead Cells, Fallout 4, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima. I could go on and on. Like, these are great games. Like, and I think it does compare to the games on Game Pass. Again, it's great that you can kind of pay this one fee in this ecosystem of Microsoft, and you don't have to worry about it. That's fantastic. That's very consumer friendly. That's a awesome thing to do. But that's something that Microsoft can do because guess what? They have Windows, they have Office, they have so many other streams of income coming in that they're allowed to do this because, as anybody who follows the industry kind of knows, Phil Spencer's never said that Game Pass is profitable. He says it's sustainable. He says that we can keep this up, but that's because Microsoft has so much money. So I think again, what you said, the value proposition, I think Sony did a great job with it, with adding this library in that gets people excited. If you missed a title here or there, being able to play, you being a perfect example with Death Stranding. One thing I do think that is kind of interesting, though, is the fact that the tiers to me almost seemed reversed in the fact that, again, looking at this list of games on the service ranked by Metacritic or OpenCritic, whichever the two, out of the top 20 games, I've played 18 of them, right? You've played, you're not as much of an indie game guy, which is, that's just your taste, but I'm sure you've played all the big ones. So it's just interesting to me that the people who you might think are your most diehard gamers, like there's really not a lot of reason to get it. Unless if you are somebody who really has that nostalgia play and really wants to play some PlayStation 1 games, which there's people out there, but I don't have enough time to play any of the new stuff that I want, so it's hard to go back. But it's just kind of an interesting thing I noticed about the service itself. But like you said, man, if I was a college student who's just getting some money, who maybe, parents never really bought him much games or you got like a game a year. Oh my God. Can you imagine just the amount of content that you could sit there for days and just try a game for an hour and just try another game and try another game and just really pick apart the library and then walk away, I guarantee, with probably 50 things you would want to play. It really is a feeding frenzy. So I personally think Sony's doing a good job. I think that they could do a little bit more with messaging and making it clearer just in terms of what's where, because there's so many moving pieces. But I think that's also something that'll get ironed out, as time passes. And I'm excited to see what do they add. Like you said, Stray. If they're able to put these little smaller $20-$25 games, maybe like a Hollow Knight Silk Song, or some those kind of indie games, day and date. I mean, I think that's might be enough to get me to subscribe to, just because, like you said, if the difference in money is $60 a year, whether I buy these games a la carte or I just subscribe to this thing, why not subscribe? So
Right.
yeah, I think it's a pretty good rollout. Hope it stays strong.
Yeah, we'll definitely be watching it. That's for sure. Like as Game Pass announces, their July games as they just recently did.
Right.
PlayStation's going to do the same thing. So I mean, I will be talking about this for a long time, and every time a big game is on there, we'll definitely be talking about it. And I mean, it's only a matter of time. I know we're both not currently subscribed to the premium or extra tier, but it's only a matter of time. We'll be there this year. I guarantee it.
Do you think that every Sony first party game will eventually find its way onto the service? Like, do you think Sony has an internal kind of clock for how long it's gonna, like if God of War Ragnarok comes out, like a year, 2 years? Like, what do you think?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't. Yeah, how long before the game releases? Because I mean, there's some older, even like Last of Us 2, but I'm sure they have plans for that.
Yeah.
It's not on here, and that came out before Ghost of Tsushima. I don't know. I'm assuming they'll have some kind of cadence, like maybe every other month a big Sony first party game will appear on there that has been out for more than a year. Um, Spider-Man's about to come on PC, so maybe that's why the older Spider-Man isn't on here. But yeah, it really doesn't make any sense because I don't think Spider-Man 1's on here.
I'd have to check. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
But I know Miles Morales is, so
Yeah.
and that's the cheaper expansion. But yeah,
Just a quick correction. Yeah, Spider-Man is on there. But
wow.
yeah, so it is on there, but it'll be interesting to see, what is their process for that, because you need to keep people hooked, you need to keep people subscribing over and over and over again. So, there's smarter people, I'm sure, in those boardrooms than you and I that are figuring it all out and having the analytics. But
yeah, it's marketing. I mean, Last of Us 2 Part 2 is going to be on there. That's marketing. Like,
yep,
buy the extra tier, you get Last of Us Part 2. Who's not doing it then,
Right.
if you haven't played the game, so.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next thing, and this is what inspired our You Owe Me a Pizza clip. While we were recording last week, I mentioned that there was a Final Fantasy event going on, and sure enough, as I also mentioned, who knows what they're going to announce at these things. They could have just said nothing, like we're going to release some new avatars, or we got at future dates, we're going to talk about more games, but Square Enix decided to bring it. And while announcing remakes for Final Fantasy Crisis Core and other projects, the one we're really, really excited for is Final Fantasy VII Remake 2, which is now called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. There are two things I want to talk about this. John, you beat Final Fantasy VII Remake earlier this year. I want to gauge your excitement level for this game, which they announced is going to be coming out next winter. Whatever that means. I'm assuming it's going to be 2024, but it could be 2023. You don't know. And also the fact that they already announced that this is part of a trilogy now. And how do you feel about knowing, if we just go by the cadence of these games, if Rebirth releases in 2024, how do you feel and how do you think about playing a game in 2028, finishing this series in 2028, 6 years from now? In probably the best case scenario.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to get your thoughts on both of those things.
So, I think it's important to understand that I am kind of a unique Final Fantasy VII player. So I never played the original until very recently, and I still haven't gotten through the whole thing. I've actually just been playing on my Switch here and there. So I don't have a lot of history with the original series. And from everything that I obviously learned playing through Part 1, and as well as just kind of listening to people talk about this second one, seems like they're really, really diverging from the original story and taking their own spin on it. So from that standpoint, I'm very excited because, part of the reason I think it took me so long to get to Part 1 and play through it was I just didn't have the connection to it, and I was kind of nervous and scared that, is there things I'm missing? Are there Easter eggs here and there? Would I get a lot more out of this if I have the knowledge of the original, which kind of spurred me to go back and play it on the Switch. So the fact that this does seem to be its own standalone story, or at least something that's kind of tangentially related to the first one and its own like spin, almost kind of like a remix of sorts, I think is pretty exciting. I can understand how for some people that might be a little bit of a disappointment, being that Final Fantasy VII, probably has more. It's my favorite game of all times than almost anything short of like Ocarina of Time. There's so many people that hold that game in high regard. So the idea that, oh man, we're not getting an open world, thing like we had in the original or whatever the case. I can see how that might be a little disappointing, but I really fell in love with the characters going through the first one. I think Cloud is an all-time protagonist. It's iconic, from the sword to the hair, to him being a soldier. Like, there's so many iconic things with him. So kind of seeing how him and Sephiroth are going to develop going forward, because I do know some of the bullet points from the first one. I don't want to spoil anything, and just in case anybody hasn't gotten through those, but I am curious to see how the relationship develops. But in regards to the time period of how long it's going to take to get through these games, I think the fact that, again, being that it is its own spin, takes a little bit of the sting out of the length. It's a 10-year development cycle. But if you kind of think of it more like this is Final Fantasy 7A, Final Fantasy 7B, Final Fantasy 7C, like 3 separate games, right? Because they are this new vision. It's not just retelling this one story. It's telling this one story with this spin on it, with this new story arc. I think it makes it a little bit easier to swallow. But yeah, man, it is kind of ridiculous. Just, I don't know, what is it going to be? It's going to be 8 to 10 years from start to finish. So it's I would say the biggest downside of it would maybe be opportunity cost. This is a great team, the Creative Assembly, or Creative Business Assembly 3, is that what it is? I know it's something incredibly silly. It's like, what could these guys do if they weren't just working on this property? What could they do if they decided to do their own thing? 10 years is a long time to tie up a whole team of people. But if they can produce something of the quality that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 was, I don't see how you can be disappointed, because it created some memorable moments. It had some pretty awesome gameplay. The combat was fast, kinetic, allowed you to slow it down if you wanted to, and kind of, flesh out the story a little bit more. Right? Taking a bouncer from the first game that had 3 seconds of screen time into this fully fleshed out character is, something that's kind of cool. And they do that multiple times throughout the series. So, yeah, I mean, I can't wait to play it next winter. Let's hope that it doesn't get delayed like everything else seems to nowadays. So we'll see, because you start adding in some delays, that 8 to 10 years starts to get to 10 to 12, and that might be a little bit too much.
Yeah, it's kind of a frightening thing to think about now. Like, in the previous generations, video games were 2 to 3 years, and now it's, as we've seen with a lot of studios, Bethesda, Rocksteady, that the time period between these games is getting longer and longer. That announcing a trilogy is just a daunting task. It's almost like, when Todd Howard mentioned 1,000 planets in Starfield, and my eyes roll back. It's the same thing here. It's like, oh, this is part of a trilogy, and you're like, oh my god, like.
Did you hear, by the way, that Todd Howard mentioned Fallout 5?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That game will come out even after this third Final Fantasy game.
That game is coming out in 2037, dude. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So you hear these things, and it's just like, wow, like, man, games are taking a long time to come out. And so it's just something to think about. I'll be there, I'm sure, when Final Fantasy VII Revengeance comes out on PlayStation 6 eventually. I'll be there, but it's just a bummer, I think. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean it's
Game
something,
development's taking too long and it sucks, but it's the reality of what it is now.
yeah. Well, and then you add in the fact too that it seems like every single game is not really done when they're released. You get day one patches and added DLC that maybe should have been in the game, and tweaks here and there. So it's a hard pill to swallow, but it's kind of similar to maybe how I feel about the $70, when everybody's kind of getting upset about $70 PlayStation games, right? It's like, well, that's just kind of how it is nowadays, man. Like, it's if you want to play games, if this is a hobby that's important to you, if this is something that you want to, keep going forward, you just kind of got to roll with the times. Yeah, but it's quite the wait, the wait.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Is just set your expectations. Like we got to readjust the expectations that we used to have, and now apply it. And not only to this, and what we were like previously talking about, like game announcement to release date, and now that game development. If it is going to be a part of a larger series, is just strap in and just be patient.
Backlogs,
it'll
people.
Get here. Yeah.
Backlogs.
And Final Fantasy VII did have like DLC, so a year later, you weren't. It's not like you're completely detached from that world and that series. They ended up telling a good. The Yuffie DLC for Final Fantasy VII Remake was actually pretty good, and it'll hold you over a little bit while you're agonizingly waiting for the rest of the games to come out.
Right? Was that good? I never got to it.
Yeah, it is very good. I don't know if I would pay full price for it because it is very short. It's about 6 hours, and that's me completing a lot of they have their own little Gwent equivalent, card game equivalent in the game. I completed all that, so I padded my own experience in it. But if you're just doing the story, it might be even shorter. So, but if it shows up on sale, yeah, it's a great little story that is a character in the original Final Fantasy VII that didn't get a lot of screen time. In fact, she could have been a missable character. So not a lot of people, have experience with Yuffie, and she is a fun character to play. You're not a big guy carrying a sword. You're throwing a giant shuriken that you can jump to and change the elements on as well. So.
Oh, that's cool. Cool.
All right, so let's move on. Let's keep this Final Fantasy train going. John, what do you got for us next?
That's right. So wanted to touch base a little bit on Final Fantasy XVI, next mainline entry into the Final Fantasy series. We've been getting a decent amount of spin-offs lately with Remake Part 1, and they also announced a Crisis Core thing coming, and Stranger of Paradise, trying to kill chaos over and over and over again. But it's been a couple years. I want to say Final Fantasy 15 came out in 2015. So we're finally getting our next mainline series entry into the series, and I gotta say, man, I am pretty stoked about this one. We got a quick trailer during the Sony State of Play that kind of showcased the world itself, and a little bit, obviously not getting a lot of story beats, but kind of some of the different things you'll see in the game. And I think anybody who watched that trailer would agree the main focal point seems to be the summons. And it really seems like they're kind of taking that to heart with the game. We actually got a decent dump of information from the game director today, Hiroshi Takai, just kind of going over some of the different elements and things we'll see in the game, answering very, very brief questions, but I kind of wanted to just go over a little bit of that. And I wanted to kind of start off with just a little bit of quote about the gameplay, because I find this pretty interesting. Final Fantasy in general, traditionally a turn-based game, right? It's a little bit slower, more methodical. We've recently gotten into faster-paced action RPG stuff, I think, with the start of Final Fantasy 15 and, taking some Kingdom Hearts influence. But this one sounds a little bit interesting, so I'm just going to read a snippet from director Takai here. He says, Final Fantasy VII Remake would not exist without the original Final Fantasy VII, and those original systems ultimately influenced what Remake became. Final Fantasy XVI, however, is a completely new game with a completely different concept. In order to take the series in a new direction rather than build off old battle systems, director Hiroshi Takai and battle director Ryota Suzuki, real quick, who did Devil May Cry 4 and 5, which is very exciting, made real-time action their focus. Yoshida explains, translating traditional summon abilities into player actions and allowing for the real-time swapping and chaining of abilities in battle has allowed us to create a system that not only looks great, but feels really good to play. There will also be times where the player will control an Akon in real time battling other Akons. I believe those are the summons in this game. The battle type and scale are somewhat fluid and change seamlessly in real time depending on the battle, keeping things at maximum efficiency or maximum excitement while maintaining immersion. These very types of Acon-driven, action-oriented battles are one of the main selling points of Final Fantasy XVI, and we'll be bringing more to you in the coming months about them. I think that sounds dope. I think that could be something really cool, and kind of take some of the action. Introduce something new into the series. Anybody who's a fan of anime, which I would imagine there's a pretty decent crossover in the video game community, is going to see obvious Attack on Titan influences here, because one of the things that we notice is the summons are not just summons. They're actual people in the world themselves. So it seems like we'll be meeting some characters who are able to turn into these gigantic Godzilla type creatures that duke it out, and then possibly switch back into a battle with your guys on the ground with swords while this crazy thing's happening in the background. And I think it just has the opportunity to be awe-inspiring, grandiose, and all this awesome kind of high fantasy craziness, man. Like, it seems very Attack on Titan. If anybody's familiar with Attack on Titan, one of my favorite shows I've ever seen. So I think that there's a lot to be excited about. And just a couple other points about the game itself. They have since confirmed that there will be full AI-driven party members. A lot of people were concerned, I think, when the trailer came out, that it would just be one character you're controlling, which is very un-Final Fantasy. So there will be other characters. One of those characters may be a puppy, which is amazing. His name's Torgal. So we might get a little puppy that can, you can battle alongside. And it's confirmed to not be open world, which is, I think, kind of interesting. In an age where it seems like everything is getting the open world treatment, as we discussed last week with Sonic Frontiers, I think there is still a lot to be said about a tight, narratively constructed linear game, or at least, to take another Sonic pull, an open zone game, right? That maybe you're going into these areas and kind of exploring them for a little bit. But I think that definitely lends itself to the narrative side of everything. It allows you to have a more controlled narrative sequence, as opposed to open world storytelling, which can kind of jump here and there. You get lost with side quests. You kind of forget what the main narrative is. So, if they really have a solid story to tell, and if there's these more mature themes that they kind of keep talking about, I think this could shape up to be one of the better entries. And I'm really hoping it is, because I think it's been a while since Final Fantasy has really been on the top. It's always been this very popular series. They sell tens of millions of copies. But I mean, would you agree, Nick, that Final Fantasy really hasn't been the pinnacle that it once was since like the 7 and 9 days? They're always really, really good. And, 14 is kind of turning that around a little bit, but it's in a much different space. Do you think that Final Fantasy, has room to still grow in this day and age? And do you think that this could be the one to get them there?
Yeah, of course. Final Fantasy games are still huge, regardless of how people feel about each individual entry. They wildly change up the characters in combat. That everyone kind of has their favorites, and they kind of jump all over the place as to what people's favorites are. But the series is always incredibly popular, so Square Enix is always dumping as much money into their mainline projects. So this is going to be a huge game, I'm sure, and everything we've seen so far is very exciting. A lot of Final Fantasy games are kind of just the same old thing. You get into a battle, you might summon a guy who does an automatic attack. You cast Faraga, you do your basic attacks, you do your limit breaks, and that's kind of like the pace of the whole game. You get better, all those abilities get better and better throughout the game, but there's really not a change up in combat. And then now you throw on playing as the summons themselves. You're playing as Shiva and Ifrit. That just mixes things up, and as we saw in the trailer, like they have health bars too,
right?
So you're commanding them, doing attacks, and it just looks very exciting.
It almost looks like a fighting game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It does, and yeah, that's all exciting. And just I think another comment he had made is that they plan to tell a more mature story in this one, and that's music to my ears.
Yep.
Because a lot of these JRPGs, they kind of skew a little. They go both ways. It's like, they kind of have they'll have the younger characters, the little kiddie characters, and the story will be typical, your basic anime premise all the time. Main character forgets their memory, has to save the world, and all that. So the storytelling is not always there, and I will say Final Fantasy is usually an exception to this. Their stories are usually a lot better.
Yeah.
I didn't complete Final Fantasy 15, but it's definitely a different story. You're on a road trip with your royalty, and you're on a road trip with your brother, your best friends.
You better say bros right now. If
Yeah,
you don't say
with
bros.
your bros.
Yeah.
With your bros, and they all have their personalities, and it's not a typical story by any means. And this, as far as we've seen so far in the trailer, it looks the same. So yeah, I think that this Final Fantasy will be pretty big. And it will be PlayStation only, which is a big deal too.
Yes.
So I don't know how that will change. I'm assuming most of the copies have always sold on PlayStation compared to Xbox, but this is a flagship game for the console without a doubt. So yeah, Square is going to be behind it. Sony's going to be behind it. This is going to be a big deal when it comes out next year. I believe summer they are planning at the end of the trailer. So.
Yeah, I want a Final Fantasy game to be a front runner for Game of the Year again.
Yes.
It feels like it's been again, some people like 15, some people didn't. Some people like 13. Well, in fact, most people didn't, I would say, with 13. I think a lot of people like 12. I think 12 is probably the last one that was universally acclaimed. And my personal favorite, which I know might upset some people, was 10. That I think kind of was the last time that it was like this, industry leading game. But I just want them to get back to that, man. I want them to be, oh my God, did you play the last Final Fantasy game? Because that was, such an important part of the growth of video games. Final Fantasy VII, one of the most important games ever. Final Fantasy VI, I've never played it. A lot of people say one of the best RPGs ever made. Same with Final Fantasy IX. So would just love a return to form. And with the Final Fantasy XIV director at the helm and the more mature tone, adding these summon things, I think they're saying the right things and getting, people excited. They just have to execute now. So we'll see.
Yeah, and next year is going to be pretty stacked if all these games that, the ones that got delayed out of this year and the ones announced for this year, it would at least, I don't think Final Fantasy 16 would win against like a Breath of the Wild 2, but it would be great if it was in the discussion that, at the Game Awards at the end of the year,
right.
It was one of the games that, stood out with, the Spider-Man 2 and all the other games that will be out next year. That would be great,
Right.
Oh, and final question before we move on.
Mm-hmm.
Is the dog going to have its own summon?
I think that's asking too much. I don't know, man.
It could turn into a giant chocobo or something. There are goofy summons.
There's so many.
Final
yeah,
Fantasy.
absolutely.
They're not all the bad ass dragons and and other characters. So
I hope so. Because there could be a world. I think thinking back to my Final Fantasy experience, I would say there's typically 7 to 8 summons in a game. Would you say that's fair?
There's a lot in Final Fantasy VII. There's way more than that.
Is there? Okay,
yeah.
so 10's my main experience. I think there's about 7 to 8. So
yeah, they definitely toned it down after.
Okay. Well, so that's kind of, so maybe if this game is so heavily focused on summons, if that's like one of the driving factors, as they said in that quote, there could be a world where there's 25 summons. I think it was Final Fantasy VI that had 15 or 16 playable party members. So,
right.
Nothing says that they can't blow that up here too. So, as much as I would love a pupper summon, I don't know if it's a playable character, maybe, but I don't know, man. It might be just asking for too much. We don't want to give them the Game of the Year award,
Yeah, spoiler, John. It is the best summon in the game. The best one in Final Fantasy VII was Knights of the Round Table. That's what it does. Knights of the Round. It turns into like 13 dudes that just wreck people.
And instead of a 45-second cutscene every time, it's just 6 minutes long every time. You're gonna watch this because, god damn it, this dog is so cute.
Yep. The main villain is going to try and kill you. The dog's going to be there. Its eyes are going to glow, and you're going to go, what? And then it's going to turn into 13 knights.
Oh, man.
And just
man. Dream come true.
I think if this does come true, you owe me like a month of meals.
You got it. You'll get a couple. You'll get a couple pizzas.
All right. So moving on, the next topic is going to be very short, and here it is. My next video game. What am I going to play? I started this year kind of strong. I went from Horizon Forbidden West into Deathloop into Cyberpunk 2077, but I'm kind of in a lull here. And so there are a few games that I have not played that let's just decide right now which one I'm gonna play next. So here's the list. I played Danganronpa 1 and 2. I still have not played 3. That's on the list. Mm-hmm. As we mentioned earlier, I have not played Death Stranding. That is on the list. I also have not played what everyone's favorite JRPG, Persona 5. The Royal Edition. And then I also have not played what everyone seems to consider the game of the generation, Disco Elysium. Everyone loves this game so much. I gave it about 5 minutes and bounced off of it, but I'm willing to give it another shot. And then finally, with these Resident Evil announcements, I still have not played the remakes of 2 and 3. So I am adding those to the list as well. Because 3 is kind of a 6-hour game. If I'm going to do 2, might as well play through 3 too. So, is there any games, John, that I should, before I spin this wheel, that I should add to this list?
No, but can I say which one I'm pulling for?
Yeah.
Okay. Persona 5, baby, let's go. I want to. So to the audience, I have recently. I've never played Persona 5, but what I did do is I watched a 65-hour YouTube video over the course of a year and a half to get the story, and the story was damn good. So I'm very happy I did it. But yeah, I'd love to get your impressions on that game because I know how much you like narrative, and I know how much you like bonds and kind of getting to know characters on a intimate level, and that game has that in spades. So that's what I'm pulling for. Also, I want to see you try and get through a 110-hour game because I think that'd be pretty funny. So we'll see.
All right. Yep. I will not be able to play another game for the next 6 months because I'll be all Persona all the time. Which could be it could be a segment, Persona 5 segment. Like who am I dating? Who am I into?
Who's my waifu today?
Yeah. Who's my waifu? It wouldn't be the worst thing. A lot of people say it's the best RPG. Jason Schreier. Yeah. After they announced that it's coming to PC and all that, he's like, I'm going to play through it a third time, and I'm like, oh,
I can't imagine, man. I can't imagine that, but hey, more power to you.
And he has a kid too, John. I don't know. You're just slacking.
Well, I have a 9 to 5. How about that?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's not wait any longer. All right. Spinning the wheel. Here we go. The wheel is spinning. It is slowing down. Oh, boy. So it landed on the same thing that I tested earlier.
Death Stranding.
It is Death Stranding.
All right.
So the cool thing is because this is on the PlayStation Plus Extra tier, I'm signing up today, and I'll download the game. So there you go. I'm going to start playing Death Stranding, the one Hideo Kojima game I have not played. And so I will probably have thoughts in a future podcast.
So I also haven't played this game. Nick, should I put off playing Doom Eternal and start this? I know we won't finish at the same time because you have much quicker than I am, but should I start this too, you think?
That is entirely up to you. And I will say this. If I utterly hate this game, I will not complete it. That's not... I am not...
Weak.
In my younger days, I would play games to completion. That is not the case here.
Nick,
I'm going to give Death Stranding...
The wheel spoke.
All hail the wheel. So,
No, that's fair.
all right. So, Death Stranding is my next game. I will definitely have some updates in the next few weeks as I play through it and give you my thoughts. All
Perfect.
right, John, bring it home.
All right. So as we kind of mentioned earlier in the podcast, fresh off of last night, I finally got through about 3 months late, but finally got through Horizon Forbidden West. And so I just wanted to have a kind of a little spoiler session, just kind of go over our thoughts on the game, what we liked about it, what we didn't. So just kind of, real quick. So Horizon Forbidden West came out at the end of, was it the end of February, Nick?
Yeah.
February.
Whenever
Okay.
Elden Ring came out, it was the week before.
Yeah, poor Guerrilla. Made by Guerrilla Games, one of the Sony first-party teams. Sequel to the fantastic 2017 game Horizon Zero Dawn. I think this game's great. I think this game does some things better than almost any other game on the market. I think that, obviously the main drawing point is how pretty it is. I recently got the LG C1 OLED TV, and my God, this game, it just it looks so good on there. Just all the colors are so vibrant. The blacks are so deep and dark, and it just really shines.
Stop rubbing it in, John.
Yep.
Not all of us have this TV.
You have an open invitation, man. Anytime you want to come over.
That's not the same.
No, you're right.
You come with it.
But I think it it excels so much. The combat is fantastic. Nothing feels better than picking apart a machine and tearing off its armor and whittling it down until it starts to kind of like hobble around all over the place and finally getting it down. Whether it's something like a Tremor Tusk, a Slither Fang, these elephant or large cobra type creatures, that we get to take down. But I think. It deserves all the credit it does. It does have the unfortunate downside of coming out a week before Elden Ring, and also the first one came out a week before Breath of the Wild, so there is sort of a curse around this game. But I think there's also been an unfair kind of comparison between this and Elden Ring. They're two separate games, right? They're both open world games, but one is doing something completely different than the other. So without going too much into Elden Ring, I will say I did have a couple things about the game that maybe I wish they did a little bit better, and namely that would probably be narratively.
Okay. I just want to I want to stay on the gameplay before we get to the plot, because I really do want to put a big fat spoiler warning. On that. But
no, that's fair. So yeah, like I said, like the enemy design is great. Seeing different animals kind of pop in, that you might not expect to see a giant machine version of is always very cool. There's one specific flying creature I won't mention that I thought was a really cool combat encounter. And yeah, I couldn't get over how pretty it was. All the underwater segments. There's a specific moment probably about halfway through the game where there's a lot of lights and pretty things kind of happening. That I guess we'll probably talk about when we go through the narrative side. But yeah, man, I don't think anybody does an open world Ubisoft style game better than this. And I know that can have a negative connotation to it. But it is very, filled up map, go through, clear out bases, do this kind of stuff. But just being in that world and just kind of taking it all in makes it doesn't feel like a chore at all. So,
right.
Yeah, man. What did you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, its strongest suits is the gameplay, the environments. Like, my God, like just like you go through a desert, you go through snowy landscapes, and you're in a giant winter storm, and then you go through these giant forests with giant, redwood trees, and then you finally get all the way to the west, and you're in this beautiful dystopian San Francisco, but it's like all tropical and beautiful, and there's creatures swimming in the water, creatures grazing here. It's just so incredible to take in. It's like a visual feast for the eyes, and then you get into combat with these robot dinosaurs and animals, and they're just all distinct, and they all have different fight patterns, and if you're not careful, they can overwhelm you. It's an incredible amount of detail goes into this world that it's really unmatched. That yeah, the comparisons can be made to an Ubisoft game, but nobody else is doing it this good.
Right.
Even Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the recent game, which I thought was pretty good, it's just nowhere on the scale of what this game is doing. It's just Guerrilla Games has always been just a visual showcase for the PlayStation platforms, even more than, Insomniac and other first-party developers. It's just wow.
Yep.
Like, it's great.
It's probably the best looking game I've ever played. I mean, just to put that statement out there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it runs on PS4. I haven't seen it on PS4, but that's also just a testament. I'm sure it looks
Right.
amazing there too. I mean, we can get there now, like with the part of the game that I believe we both didn't like very much. So we're gonna put a big fat spoiler warning. If you listen beyond this point right now, we will spoil specific plot points, including the ending of this game. So, given that warning, John, take it away. What did you think of the story?
I thought it was pretty half-baked. I mean, I think that, we were set up going into this, after the events of the last game, with Silence kind of taking Hades away and, almost betraying Aloy. You didn't really know where the story was going to go. And so we get introduced to these characters, right, called the Far Zenith, or the Zeniths, I guess we'll say for short. And they're these immortal interstellar travelers with shiny, translucent shields that make them invincible. And the way that they're kind of used throughout the story and introduced just seems so half-hearted. It just, there's not a lot of threats and reasons why they're there. It's always obviously intentionally vague in the beginning, but even as the story progressed, I just felt like the motivations and just like the threat levels that they're providing just seems so just, again, half-baked. And I never wanted to know more about them. I never needed to. It just was like, oh, they're here again. I guess I better, let this cutscene play out, and then I'll just carry on with the rest of the game. And so that always left a bad taste in my mouth anytime I saw them. And also over the same amount of time, there's this other enemy that's introduced, right? Regala, and she's kind of she's the bad guy of Earth, right? Not this interstellar bad guy. She's the one just kind of causing problems for you while you're trying to deal with these other people. And she's a part of the Tanakh tribe, which are, the tribe that exists in the far west. And so they're a little more ruthless, a little more, mean-spirited. And so she's kind of trying to take down the existing chief of the Tanakh. I believe his name's Hikaru. And to kind of draw a comparison here, I know probably not a lot of people have seen Eternals because it's not great, right? But there's a problem with this movie where you get introduced to a bad guy. And it could be said for anything. It doesn't have to be Eternals. But you get introduced to a bad guy, and you're expecting this to be the bad guy, and this to be the motivations for what my character's doing. And then when you kind of start to go through the game, and you haven't seen a lot of them, and then they're not there, and they're not menacing, and then they kind of just pop up here and there towards the end of the game, it's just like, oh yeah, I forgot about you. And that game, it seemed like that a lot with this.
Yeah.
Where, I don't really know what I'm fighting in the moment, what's important, what's not important, and it seemed really scattershot. And also like kind of just some really minor thing, but like they made an edition of this game, the Regala edition. It was like the deluxe edition of the game. And so it's just really weird to me that everything felt it just felt a little flat.
And do you remember who plays Regala as well?
No, I don't. Oh, wait, Angela Bassett, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, we're bringing in these big star name, actors, and yeah, it just seems like, okay, well, we have her for 2 days, so we'll get her to record a couple lines, and we can't use her a lot because we can't pay for her to be here all this time, or whatever the case. I'm sure that's not what happened, but it's just. I would rather you give me one strong antagonist that has a motivation for trying to do all these things. Because I beat it yesterday, man. I can't really tell you what Regala was doing besides she just didn't like Hikaru. She's just kind of, going through and just seems to be causing problems for everybody because we need problems to happen for Aloy while she's trying to get to the West.
and that's never a good narrative driver. So that being said, I mean, there were some parts that were okay. I think they did a better job with some of the side characters. One of the things kind of about this game that I found interesting or kind of funny was you start this game off and they throw everybody from the first game at you. And I don't think I knew a single one of them except for Varl, right? Who ended up being a main character in this game. So I think they did a better job with some of the side characters. You kind of have this base that you keep going back to here and there. These people are at the base with you, so you kind of build relationships a little bit more. So I think they did a better job with some of that. But overall, I was kind of hoping the story hit a little bit harder. And maybe you can touch a little bit, Nick, upon this nemesis thing that's kind of leading into the third game. And then what ultimately is the main antagonist of the game, this character named Tilda, who is also one of the Zeniths. But, it seemed like the writers didn't really know how to utilize her as well. So I feel like I'm kind of just rambling here, Nick, if you want to kind of take over a bit and just... what did you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. Everything you said about Regala, because she is introduced as you get into the Forbidden West as this big bad enemy. She makes a big showy entrance. She kills a guy you just met. She does all these bad things, and the next story mission later, you are introduced to the Zeniths, and they just boom undercut her right out of there. And again, I think it was funny talking even before this game came out. We were talking about just anime and how I hate the trope in anime is that they just constantly release a story element is just have an enemy that's stronger than the enemy they fought before. And here comes Horizon Forbidden West, and the Zeniths are exactly that. They're way overpowered, absurdly overpowered. They're immortal, they fly, they're invulnerable. It's just one of the most absurd things.
Right.
Third characters that ever been written.
Which none of which they explain. They don't explain why they're immortal. They don't explain, why they can fly. And you could just say advanced technology, but I don't know. That seems weak.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've existed the whole time after, the machines killed everyone on the planet and the planet's been terraformed a few times. So they've been around over 1,000 years. I guess we just have to make that logic leap that they would learn all these things. But then everything's just frustrating. It's even when they're comically bad, which is also worse. They're just evil for the sake of evil.
Yep.
And at first I thought they just have a god complex, right? We're the advanced ones. We're the ones who've been around forever. We have this ego, but they just kill people left and right. And then when the big reveal, the ending of the story is they took Gaia, the machine that terraforms the planet, because they're being chased by this super AI that's coming to kill them, and they want to grab this stuff and get off Earth because this thing is coming to Earth. Nemesis is going to come to Earth and wipe everything out. So it's why did you have to be so evil to the people that existed on the planet if you knew they're going to die anyway? It's just like they were comic book villains, but not very good ones, because the only times we saw them was when they're, killing people, killing one of your main side partners, Varl, and then the only one we really get a kind of connection to is Tilda, played by Carrie-Anne Moss, and even she's kind of just, I don't know, she has a connection to the previous Aloy, Elizabeth Sobek, the character that Aloy is based on, and it's still it never felt good. It was just weird, I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean that all said though, I don't want to, I don't want people to think that I didn't like this game, right? I don't want, anybody to think that I thought it was anything less than excellent, because it was. I'm a very much a gameplay first kind of person. That's just how I roll with games. Some of my favorite games of all time, Hades, The Binding of Isaac, these games, where it's fast and action packed, and this game had that in spades. I just wish that,
they were able to flesh out a little bit more coherent of a story, have characters that didn't necessarily fall into such tropey things, and really stick the landing with that, where I'm going into the third game saying, oh my god, I can't wait to see what happens next, can you believe that this is going to happen? And I'm very excited for the next game, but I'm very excited for the next game because I want to see the environments, I want to fight robots, not because I care what Eric from Far Zenith is doing, even though he's dead, but just as an example. So again, but I still think the game's, it's a 9 out of 10, man. It's very, very excellent. Kind of similarly, honestly, to The Last of Us Part 2, I don't think this story had anywhere. Like, I love the story of Last of Us Part 2, but I know a lot of people didn't. But anybody who says that game is less than excellent because of the amount of detail, because of the gameplay systems put in place, how beautiful it is just wrong. I'm sorry, you have to look at the whole package, and Horizon as a whole package is great. So kind of real quick, Nick, as we go into the third game, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but where do you want to see the sequel go? Do you want to see Aloy just go explore different parts of the world? Do you think that we're just going to have to kind of stay within, obviously the United States, quote unquote, or what do you kind of want to see?
Yeah, they'll definitely have to switch up the region. I think there's a lot of similarities between this and the first game. Even though there were new biomes in this, there were also a lot of biomes that were very similar, especially if you played the DLC for the first game, which went into like a winter biome. So I really think they definitely have to go to a different part of the world, which could maybe introduce different animals. We were talking earlier, like Africa would be a great place because then, we got robot rhinos, we got robot lions, robot giraffes,
Ooh, robot giraffes. I didn't even think of that. I guess that's basically a tall neck though, right?
Yeah, but maybe not. Yeah, not as, but more of a threat to you.
An evil giraffe.
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, they definitely have to switch that up. But I mean, that's their strong point is all the environments as we've talked about and the robots themselves. So I think they know what they're doing. They're going to make it great. It's just, can they land this ridiculous story premise of and I guess we've been dealing with AIs this whole game, Hephaestus, Gaia, all that. But how can we deal with the super evil AI that's even more worse than Hades?
Well, to your point earlier, man, it seems very anime-esque, right? And let's kind of hope that maybe that's not the only thing driving the third game. It's like I don't know if we need to fight on the moon, right? Or if we need to I don't know, see the robot Loch Ness monsters or whatever the case. Try to not jump the shark too much.
Right. Well, we'll get a training montage and they'll be ready. There you go. But I'll be excited. I was a little burned out after I got the platinum of this game. That I remember instantly uninstalling it. I'm done. The 50 to 70 hours I played it, I was like, that's it, I'm out. So, but I'm sure I'll be back again because as we said, nobody's doing the Ubisoft formula quite like Guerrilla is. So I'll be there. But what do you think, John? Do you have any predictions for the next game?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, I think it would be very, very underwhelming to just stay where they're at. We've basically explored the entire United States now, right? Like, kind of Nora country is, I guess, or really, maybe Nora country is kind of like the mountains of Colorado, right? And we start going west from there, where you kind of get into the deserty climates of Utah, cross into California and all that stuff. So going east isn't very exciting because I don't think I need to see, post-apocalyptic Kansas. I don't think, maybe you could go to like Florida, where there's some swampy stuff going on, there's some wetlands, things like that. But I think now that we know Aloy can fly with different robots, it just makes perfect sense to to use that power and see what the rest of the world is, because if now the threat is global. I mean, the threat's always been global, but all of this stuff seems to be taking place in the United States. But if this AI is hurtling towards Earth, you'd think that everything wouldn't just happen in the United States. Right. So, Yeah, I mean, I think Africa sounds like a great place. Maybe something like shit, man. Australia, Southeast Asia, lots of
Robot
deadly creatures.
platypuses.
Yeah, yeah, robot platypuses, robot spiders, robot scorpions, things. Australia is known as like the deadliest place on earth, so but that also is a little bit samey to the United States too. So, I don't know. I just I have faith in Gorilla to give us something special, to give us something that's beautiful, and I really really look forward to seeing everybody unlock the full power of the PS5, because as anybody who plays a game or plays games from the beginning of a generation to the end of a generation knows, the graphical improvements are absurd that can be made. You just look at Uncharted, Drake's Fortune compared to The Last of Us, and it's night and day. So, I think it'll be a treat visually. I'm sure the combat will be the same. But like I said, I'm a gameplay guy, so I know I'll have fun. I'll be there day one.
Yep, you'll be there day one to tie it back in 2027, 2028
Yes.
for Horizon.
On episode 642 of PlayStation Pals.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, stay tuned.
Yep, that'll be the title, Horizon the Outback. All right, well, that is 6 things. We're done, John. We did it. We recorded our second episode.
Woo!
You feeling good?
Feeling good, man. Feeling good.
All right, great. So we're out of here. We're going to leave you with Final Fantasy VII Remake song. This is the most iconic song. It's the first kind of song you hear at the beginning of the game. It's called Bombing Mission. Yes, Bombing Mission by Nobuo Uematsu. All right, have a great night, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye.
Take care, guys. Bye.
You owe me a pizza.